Good morning, and welcome to this Stylo News Intelligence Update for June 19th, 2026. I am your host. Today, we're going to systematically examine a highly dynamic two-week period across the Western Hemisphere. It's a landscape currently defined by a complex intersection of transnational security operations, escalating diplomatic friction, and major international events. Let's review the facts. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge our sponsor, ProWave AI. They are the developers of Stylo News, the AI-powered open-source intelligence program, and Stylo News, the commercial platform providing the factual foundations for today's briefing. It's their technology that enables the objective analysis we're about to review.
Here is our agenda for today's briefing. We'll start with a strategic overview of the region, followed by a look at security and cartel operations. Then, we'll examine the diplomacy surrounding the recent U.S. Cuba escalation, discuss the societal impacts of the ongoing World Cup events, analyze open-source sentiments, and finally, wrap up with our forecast and strategic watchpoints.
Let's dive right into Section 1, our strategic overview of geopolitics and security. Geographically speaking, North American security discourse is currently heavily centered on what analysts are calling border resilience and a Fortress North America approach. But concurrent instability in places like Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia continues to create enduring pressures, both from criminal networks and migration. And these external events are not isolated at all. They directly affect homeland security through trafficking routes and illicit finance.
Moving on to Section 2, Security, with a specific focus on cartels and transnational operations. The cross-border reality of modern law enforcement is clearly evident right now. The focal point of recent security efforts actually culminated in Venezuela with the definitive elimination of Héctor Rucerford Guerrero Flores. He was widely known as Niño Guerrero, the leader of the transnational criminal organization Tren de Aragua. This wasn't just an isolated strike. It was the direct result of deeply coordinated intelligence sharing between the United States, Venezuela, and crucially, Peru. Let's break down the tiered impacts of this operation. Locally, within Peru, authorities are now on high alert. They're dealing with remnant criminal cells in areas like Lima, and that poses some immediate public safety challenges. Nationally, however, Peru's role has significantly enhanced its reputation as a proactive, capable actor in regional security. And internationally, this U.S.-led operation really stands as a newly proven model for multinational cooperation against deeply entrenched organized crime. The crucial point here is how decision-makers are viewing the aftermath. General Victor Reveredo of the Peruvian National Police stated quite clearly that sustained intelligence sharing is critical in tracking Guerrero's illicit finances and operations. The consensus among security officials is that while the leadership has been dismantled, absolute vigilance is required to prevent these residual cells from regenerating. Next, we turn to Section 3, Diplomacy, and the escalating tensions between the U.S. and Cuba. Geopolitical proximity often dictates strategic anxiety, and the very short distance between Florida and Havana is a persistent factor here. Tensions have notably increased following U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's recent visit to the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. The Defense Secretary issued stark warnings regarding Cuba potentially acquiring weapons capable of reaching U.S. territory, and he heavily emphasized American military readiness. Concurrently, the U.S. government has imposed severe sanctions targeting Cuba's state oil company, Cupids. To remain entirely objective, we really must look at the drastically different perspectives of the key decision-makers involved. The U.S. administration views these energy sector sanctions as a necessary measure. Their goal is to pressure the Cuban regime to cease corruption and promote political freedom by effectively disrupting the government's economic foundations. Conversely, the Cuban government vehemently condemns these actions. They view them as unjust economic warfare that violates their sovereignty, and they insist that any political change must be strictly internal. On the global stage, the international community is quite divided. The United Nations Human Rights Office has formally expressed deep concern over the humanitarian consequences of these sanctions, specifically the impact that fuel shortages will have on vulnerable populations and healthcare. Meanwhile, Latin American governments are showing mixed reactions. Some are aligning with U.S. policy against the communist regime, while others are criticizing the sanctions as counterproductive. Shifting gears to Section 4, Society, and the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Matches are currently being hosted across North America, including at major venues like MetLife Stadium in New Jersey and Akron Stadium in Zapopan, Mexico. But hosting an event of this magnitude in today's geopolitical climate requires immense force protection and counterterrorism vigilance.
The sheer logistical challenge of securing global gatherings amidst the regional tensions we've just been discussing cannot be overstated. The impacts of this tournament are truly multifaceted. Locally, we're seeing friction points. For example, in Los Angeles, Iranian American communities have faced visa restrictions and FIFA flag bans, leading to community frustration. Conversely, cities like Zapopan are experiencing massive economic and tourism surges. Nationally, the host countries are balancing immense national pride with a very heavy security burden. And internationally, the tournament remains a powerful engine for cultural diplomacy, drawing massive global viewership and momentarily uniting divided nations.
That brings us to Section 5, an analysis of public sentiments and open sources.
When we analyze user sentiment on X, it reveals a highly polarized landscape. Regarding U.S. Cuba relations, the sentiment is notably anti-interventionist and alarmist. Many users are expressing deep distrust of U.S. motives. They view the sanctions as hypocritical and fear potential conflict. In stark contrast to that, the public reaction to the military and police strikes against the trendy Aragua cartel in Venezuela is largely factual and neutral. Users are sharing breaking news about the operations with minimal commentary, which indicates a broad, quiet approval of those security actions.
Finally, Section 6, our forecast and strategic watchpoints for the near future. Over the coming weeks, our intelligence suggests we should expect continued high-level discourse regarding that Fortress North America border approach. Additionally, keep an eye on Arctic security competition involving the U.S., Canada, Russia, and China. Domestically within the U.S., scheduled protests against ICE detention centers indicate ongoing political polarization. And finally, the threat of violence from residual cartel cells in South America remains a persistent reality that we will be tracking. To synthesize all of this for you, we have a clear 3-step framework for your own observation. First, monitor developments in border and supply chain security across North America. Second, track reports of international intelligence sharing, specifically regarding the cleanup of those residual criminal networks. And third, watch closely for any further diplomatic or military escalation in the Caribbean involving the U.S. and Cuba. That concludes our objective briefing for today. This early morning presentation serves as a lead-in to our full comprehensive morning audio explainer. To hear deeper analysis and stay informed on these continuing developments, we encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News. You can get AI-powered intelligence on demand by visiting www.stylonews.com. As we watch these events unfold, we leave you with this final question. In a hemisphere increasingly defined by heavily guarded borders, can multinational cooperation actually outpace the evolution of transnational threats? Thank you for listening, and have a safe, informed day.